Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from Global Alts Miami by iConnections. Joining me for the segment, we have Adam Guren, Chief Investment Officer, Hunting Hill Global Capital. We're here to discuss the global landscape of alternative investments, how it's evolving, and if hedge funds are ready for digital assets. It is great to have you with us, Adam. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Yeah.
So
Jill,
let's talk about the current environment and the specific area of focus for you as it relates to digital assets within the alt space.
Yeah, so first of all, Jill, thanks for having me.
It.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And yeah, Hunting Hill, we're an asset manager based in New York, and we've been involved in the crypto space since 2016. So we previously, my background is in the TradFi space,
right.
And so coming from that as a lens, approaching some of the strategies that we run in crypto from that particular seat, has been super interesting in the last, really in the last 12 to 18 months, as the universe of TradFi has started to collide with crypto in a lot of different ways, starting with the ETF conversion in the US, with GBTC and a lot of the other, obviously BlackRock and Fidelity and some of the other players coming involved into the space. And as far as the alts are concerned, we're starting to see more investors ask questions that they wouldn't have otherwise done 12 months ago. And that started really in September. I think some of those investors were looking at the election and understanding, regardless of who was winning, they started to do their homework. And it's accelerated pretty significantly in the last, call it 30 to 60 days. And I do think there's an element of demand coming from the investment committee levels asking, what are we doing here in the space? Where those questions weren't asked, previous to the last 12 months.
I would agree with you. The past 12 to 18 months, and having covered this space since 2018, which is kind of a long time, from the media perspective, the conversations have really matured. I think because crypto became part of the national conversation in 2024 as an actual, piece of the running platform, helped to accelerate that and the spot ETFs and so forth. But it's like DeFi and TradFi integration are happening now, and it's about user experience versus the separation of the ethos of the engineering, the architect, and okay, let's figure this out, what it'll look like. When you start hearing words like market structure, custodian, those are things that TradFi people understand, right? So it's starting to make sense. What other key trends do you see that's helping to evolve the space?
Yeah, as far as the alts are concerned and getting embedded in there?
Digital assets as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the high level, obviously the main event is in DC at the moment, and try to tease out what the industry from just a crypto perspective in the US, what they will be, for lack of a better term, getting from DC. So there's been asks for many years for regulatory clarity, for market structure clarity, having what they have now, obviously with Hester Pearson, that group working to see what is possible and what could happen. And that's interesting. We've seen SAB 121 being repealed. We've seen it's kind of stable coin clarity on whether the government's going to participate or not. Obviously, it's, with executive order now private has been the call. So those are already started. That's within the last week. And so from an alts perspective, I think what ultimately happens is there's some uncertainty still of what might come, and that the eventual clarity is going to demand for active management and managers that have been around to understand what's going on in the space, have been around in the space, have been able to manage risk for a while into the space, and how to produce a product or return or strategy that investors can get comfortable with, and things that they're used to seeing from a TradFi perspective, from my, from what
which makes sense too, because regulation by enforcement, particularly in a newer space like digital assets, when you think about it on a relative basis, the industry has been pretty good with advocating for that framework, so you know how to operate. I mean, it seems they're advocating for that framework, and it makes sense. So you know what you can and cannot do. And it's interesting, we would ask questions, what's the impact of the macro landscape, even just last year. And now it's almost like, okay, well, it's obvious what the impact is, and you start seeing, digital assets decouple from what's happening in the markets and how it reacts to what's happening on a macro level. I think is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's just so much going on in the last really 30 days. From our perspective, what we started to really look at is in the ETF landscape and the market structure landscape of called wrappers that people are familiar with looking at. There's now applications for XRP, for Ripple. There's applications for Solana to be converted to an ETF. There's a Dogecoin ETF that was, I think, recently, Bitwise applied for. So the question is, are those commodities or are those securities? And that's...
Or is it its own
space,
space,
or is it
right?
something different, right? And so, yeah, having that clarity, I think there's still an element of the industry pushing for clarity, and I think it coming from Congress, in the US at least, for these types of questions to be answered is extremely helpful, rather than having the SEC have to enforce and the industry to respond. So I think it's just being pushed on both sides. DC's, I think, open to providing that clarity, obviously with this task force and other things that have been going on, and the industry's continuing to push in that direction.
Especially when you think about it from how technology has impacted the space, and you want to remain leaders not only within the global capital markets, but also leaders as it relates to innovation and what's happening in financial services. So when you think about your outlook, it's great that we're getting products and so forth, but I feel like the catalyst really is getting that framework. Because once the US has that, now you're talking scale.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's, from our perspective, looking for practical use cases, and that's not just in financial services, but way that financial services can impact Main Street or day-to-day lives in a way that's positive and adding value to folks. And I think that's starting to happen. It's starting to happen in financial services with tokenized money markets, with stable coins that are interesting. But I think that a real jump is going to be when we're starting to see day-to-day lives being impacted or changed from blockchain technology or crypto.
Which is interesting, because when you think about it, 2 billion people around the world in developing areas, which you could even argue have leapfrogged some of what we understand as financial services. They are looking at alternative forms of capital formation, transacting cross-border payments and so forth, whereas sometimes we tend to be very, okay, how is it trading? What's it worth? Is it a hedge? Meanwhile, this is how local microeconomies are being built around the world.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so there's a difference between speculation on price and value creation for day-to-day lives. And I think in the TradFi space, some of the pushback has been historically, where's the value here and why is it trading at this price? Help me understand either cash flows or some modeling version that I can get to true value. And I think that's starting to happen, I guess, is the point. Is there's obviously cash flows with Ethereum, and so a way to sort of back into what a price might look like, but going down the list or going down the risk curve into other projects and what kind of adding value that they might be adding to people's daily lives. And we could think of like a DPIN where there's utility function in certain things like telecom, which we've seen, or even AI, so a decentralized AI, which there's a few projects obviously looking at ways to provide that service in a way that's not centralized into one company is super interesting. It's happening, is that I guess what I'm saying is the market structure is starting to sort itself out. And the regulatory clarity helps provide, that scale, hopefully, in the next 3 to 6 months here.
All right, Adam, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade
thanks
Talks.
for having me.
And thanks for joining me from Global Alts. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.